Welcome to a tour of my home network. Um, this is just the top of my rack, and as you can see, it is a disaster. It's gone through quite a few upgrades without me doing a full upgrade. Lots of computers moving around, the rack being rearranged, computer positions being rearranged in the rack, different computers going in the rack, new computers going in the rack, and I haven't actually done a full rework of the rack since. So it's kind of a disaster right now. I also have a cable mess because I need a new switch and I need to rerun every single Ethernet cable in this house, but I don't have any money at this point, so that's the reason why there's a ton of cable clutter for my switch. Anyway, starting at the top, I've got my PC right now that's running Smoothwall, which is my router. It's soon to be switched over to pfSense. Below that, I have the same TP-Link 24-port unmanaged switch I've had for like a decade. I have planned on replacing it with a managed switch so I can start doing VLANs and all that fun stuff, but don't have money right now because I'm not working because of the pandemic. I also needed more ports because I've almost run out of ports, and by the time I start doing some of the other plans I have for the rack, I will be out of ports. Below that, of course, my patch panel, which I just mentioned, and below that is my primary, but not technically primary, VM server. This is more so the important VM server, which keeps my home network going. I've got the Pi-hole server running on this thing, which does all the ad blocking for DNS-based ad blocking. I've also got a domain controller on here, which is running my DHCP server, a DNS server, a WinS server, and a VPN, so I can dial in and do some remote management if I need to. The other really funny thing about this VM machine is it has another VM which has a dedicated GPU. It actually has a NVIDIA GT 1030, which is one of the few cards that supports most, if not all, of the hardware decoding for the NV decode, and it's actually running a media center. I got Kodi running on a Windows 10 VM. I'm also planning on potentially migrating Plex, because I have Plex in a different VM, to this server for two reasons. The first reason is this machine is running Proxmox. My other one's running ESXi. Proxmox doesn't restrict the number of CPU threads you can throw at a VM, so it has a 2700X in it, which means I can throw all 16 threads at the VM, so I can actually properly transcode x265, because my current machine can't do it because it only can have 8 of the 16 threads. And two, I'm planning on adding a higher end GPU that has NV encode, so I can do the Plex encoding on the GPU as well, so it'll kind of help a little bit more from that sense. And below that is my power bar. This power bar is run off of a single battery backup, and it powers most of the stuff on the top of the rack, which is all considered part of the actual networking. Anything I need to get onto the internet or communicate with the rest of the network is basically powered off of that or that same battery backup. I've moved the camera down so we can take a look at the other 4 servers in my rack. You can kind of see the modem sitting on top of that VM server sitting right there. Not the ideal placement, but I kind of need it in a spot that's forward in the rack so I could see when my internet dies, whether it's my fault or my ISP's fault. And I can't see the lights anywhere where I was putting it before, so it just seemed like the best location. Okay, starting with my topmost server. This was the culmination of a couple of months worth of work trying to migrate all of the machines I had previously in my rack into a single machine. And that project failed for 2 key reasons. The first reason being that the software I was using for my router didn't like being virtualized. The second reason, which was the main reason and would have overridden that reason anyway, was the fact that whenever I need to do maintenance on that server for any reason, like putting another add-on card, swapping around an add-on card, moving some hard drives around, or whatever, I'd need to power the server down. And when I need to power the server down, I lose everything. Unless my router wasn't in it, but when it wasn't, I'd lose my DNS, it would take out my network. Plus, I needed to power the server off because the rack is tucked in a cubby hole, and I have to pull it out, and spinning drives, lots of shock, not a good idea, so it would have to be powered off because of the file servers that are in it right now. So the next server in my rack is kind of a bought it to do something, but didn't work quite the way I wanted to, so it sits doing nothing server. So that's my IBM 3650 Model 4. I bought this server as kind of a project server because I wanted to mess around more with Proxmox and hardware pass-through, and I saw that enterprise hardware had a little better of a track record with hardware pass-through working properly. So I wanted to get my hands on a proper server, and I had been watching some videos on YouTube of people that were messing with these servers, and I just kind of liked it. So I picked it up, and I ran into an issue instantly. As you can see, it's tucked into a cubbyhole. Well, or my rack is tucked into a cubbyhole. It's tucked into a cubbyhole that's right next to my bed. And the server is loud enough without add-on cards in it that it is annoying me when I'm trying to sleep. And when you put add-on cards in it, it's much louder. In fact, it's louder than the window AC unit that I was using all this time, which made sleeping difficult. So I ended up just abandoning it, and someday I might come up with a use for it, or I'll find a place to store it where I can run it without it bugging me. Moving on to the third server of these. This is my old server that was running my domain controller, my Kodi VM, and my Pi-hole VM. The reason why it's still in my rack is because I was having kernel panics on my new server, and I was only getting them after about 2 days, and I needed to put it in my rack, both of them in my rack, to get it off of my workbench so I had space to work on other projects. So I ended up moving that one way down where it is now and putting the other one in its place. It's been recently decommissioned because I found out that I had bad RAM, and that was the issue this entire time. And it's been working for about 2 weeks without a problem. So that one's been decommissioned, and I am going to repurpose it eventually to build a really overpowered Windows XP machine. And the only reason why is that's the only machine I have that is newer than a Core 2 Duo that has PCI, so I can use my Sound Blaster Omni sound card. So the last server in my rack really isn't a server right now. So I came up with the idea that I wanted to build a backup server that I turn on manually, do the backups of every computer that I want, or all the files I want, then turn it off again. But right now it's missing the OS license and a power supply. I had to cannibalize it for another project, but the plan was to use Unraid for it. Right now it has a single 8TB hard drive as the parity drive, and 8 4TB drives that were pulled out of my old file server setup before I got the 10TB drives. Below that is just a mess right now. I've got 3 battery backups that all have batteries that need to be replaced. They haven't complained yet, but it's been long enough that they need to be replaced. But the plan is to actually eventually get a 1 or 2 actually rack mount UPSs and put them on the bottom. So that's the look of my home network. It's a mess right now, but hopefully I'll be able to make a video soon of it looking cleaner.